We are here with Martin Green, the brand new director of the Eurovision Song Contest. Martin, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Can you talk a little bit about this new role at the organization that you're filling?
It's no secret that post 24, there was a relook at how the organization works, but not solely around 24. I think it had been a long time coming, mostly due to the explosion of the success of the show. And in shorthand, I think the show had got bigger than the team running it. It was decided that there needed to be a central leadership role who could look over the entire brand, if you like. One of the reasons I took the job is that this idea that you can bring people together and indeed countries together at a time when, let's face it, it's a little bit rocky out there. I think the other thing in the EBU context is that we're not a profit-making exercise. Essentially, our money does two things. It either funds staging the show or it supports public service broadcasting across Europe. And public service broadcasting right now, very much seen as the source of the truth. And yet finances are dwindling. So if we can run a project that brings people together and also funds public service broadcasting, what is not to love?
There seems to be a very concerted effort for Eurovision to kind of expand access to the national finals.
There are these great national finals. Sometimes, unless you're in that country, you're not overly aware of them until they pick their winner. Well, why can't we all see a bit more of that? It makes me laugh in a way because, this thing was invented 70 years ago and little did they know they were inventing the perfect format for the digital age, right? Appointment of view, linear television, yes, still holding strong in a world where that's disappearing. But 37 new pieces of content a year, a 9-month cycle, it's just a gift.
Just to talk about you for a second, you headed up the 2012 Olympics in London.
Not quite true. I headed up the ceremonies and torch relays.
I will say when you talk with us, that is the Olympics.
We used to say that the sport was really getting in the way of our shows. And used to really wind the sports team up by asking them if the sport they were talking about was city jumpy or throwing. But it was, we did the fun bits. Now, my love has always been spectacle. We threw the Queen out of a helicopter. This is all Danny Boyle's work. It's not mine. I was just a producer, right? But, we did brave things that caught the imagination. And I think Eurovision continues and does continue to do that. The great thing about working with pop music is that you're working with a constant barometer of where the world is. You can literally track it, what artists wish to sing about and is on their minds and the emotions they want to transmit are very much of that moment.
Eurovision 2023 is looked to as a major success all around. The contest felt like it had real purpose in the aftermath of Russia's invasion. So can you talk about your experience of putting that contest together?
That show in the UK was fantastic. We hadn't done it for 25 years and we love it. But to do it on behalf of Ukraine was really special. But I'm particularly pleased to be in this position having done that, because I can look our host broadcasters in the eye and say, I know how you feel.
Right.
I just told them not to look up the interviews that I did after Liverpool where I said never again.
Moving to some of the issues Eurovision is confronting. In 2022, Russia was kicked out shortly after the invasion of Ukraine. Obviously, last year, Israel's participation was called into question in the aftermath of what's going on in Gaza. The contest did seem to be caught a little flat-footed in talking about that distinction, given that the political climate is probably going to continue to be fractious. Is there any sort of effort to codify a standard by which a country would get kicked out for actions outside of the contest, as was the case with Russia, and then I guess Yugoslavia before that?
The first thing I'd say is to remind everyone, countries don't compete in Eurovision. Public service broadcasters do. And you only have to see, for instance, the Israeli government made another attempt to try and privatize their public service broadcast this year. Again, it was chased away. The EBU were very instrumental in helping that.
You do understand, though, that where people are coming from, where it's this is a contest that opens with a flag parade, and the flags are not the flags of, Kant and RTR and all of that. So while obviously your point is correct, I think that's where maybe some of the miscommunication might be.
And I understand that, and this is why I think there is the technical, pragmatic answer to this, and then there's the more prosaic answer. The more prosaic thing is, and I've been through this working on an Olympic Games, a Commonwealth Games, and if you want something really contested, the idea of the Commonwealth, right? I fundamentally believe that major events in sport and culture exist to show the world how it could be rather than it is. And at some point, there has to be spaces, and artists have always been good at doing this, of showing the grown-ups that their attempts to divide us will not succeed and that we have far more in common.
Finances are often cited as a reason for why some smaller countries choose not to participate in Eurovision. Then at the contest itself, one thing you often hear from smaller delegations is that it's hard to compete with the production budgets of some of the larger acts. What discussions have there been about making it easier for these countries to participate and compete at Eurovision?
One of the reasons my position was created is the ongoing financial sustainability of Eurovision. If you're going to do a show to a global standard, it will always cost a certain amount. What you can do is see if there are other ways that you can fund that show. Right. And that also extends to the participation. Now, the participation fees are relatively low and they're applied to the size of the participants. So it's not a one size fit all. Right. I think it actually reaches quite a fair level at the moment. And I am pretty convinced that cost isn't the primary motivator for people who are not currently participating. I think there's a myriad of very specific things. When it comes to production budget, most of the production is provided by the host broadcaster, that unbelievable set with all the tech and all the stuff that's moving. The application of graphics onto that is not an expensive thing. I know you can bring props in, but this is why we limit what you can do with a prop. And actually, as we know in anything arty and in life in general, it is not size that counts. I do honestly believe that it is the song and the voice and the personality of the person who's singing it that audiences react to.
In Liverpool, I'd seen a graphic about sort of like a la carte price chart about like special effects. When it comes to the sparkly back wall or the pyro, it's kind of like paid for by the second. And to my understanding, those special effects are not charged proportionally to the size of the country.
You're actually right. They're not prorated, but they're charged as cost. I don't believe any host broadcaster sets out to make money from that. I'd make the argument, I'd love to do it. Let's go through the top 3 of the last 10 years and see how much everybody used. Because you and I both know that there have been fabulous songs that got right up the top through their sheer simplicity. My main argument is that these things exist. Do they get you to win? I don't think so. Do they create a great show? Yes, I do. Is creativity really resourceful? Always. And are simple moments unbelievably powerful? Yes.
The idea that Eurovision acts and songs must be apolitical draws some controversy. Critics of the rule say its vagueness invites room for bias in decision-making, or at least the appearance of it, while others point to contest highlights like Jamala's 1944 and ask if the best Eurovision acts really need to be quote unquote apolitical. So have you thought about like specifying that rule at all or replacing it with one that's maybe more values driven? For instance, like distinguishing between a song that's pro-democracy versus, let's say, those pro-fascist Belarusian songs.
There will always be subjectivity involved in this, right? We're dealing with art, right? We're not buying paper clips or chairs, right? So there is only so much you will ever be able to write down, right? You're absolutely right. I think it comes in with the values. Now, this is where I think the great work done over the past year comes in. Bringing the code of conduct around, bringing the duty of care document around. That code of conduct essentially existed in, in a million different documents, but we'd never brought it together in a sort of user-friendly space. Yes, there's yeses and nos and do's and don'ts, but there's a lot more talk about the values of the competition, respect for other human beings, respect for point of view, looking at the safety and the mental health of our artists when they're under great pressure, bringing in, a no camera first rehearsal, bringing in a no camera first full dress rehearsal, creating camera free, broadcast free spaces backstage. This is all about reminding people of the values, which haven't changed, by the
Right.
way.
And the code of conduct does do the sort of Eurovision thing where it lays out values. But what got me thinking was the sort of appendices where it's like a violation of this principle could include not exclusive to, and then like something actually concrete. Is that moving forward kind of a section that is going to be expanded to not just giving people a clearer idea of what's acceptable versus not in terms of like backstage behavior, but also on stage?
Well, I think that the honest answer is this is the stage we've got to now. In any big project like this, there is always a review. You write it, you consult with everyone, and we consulted with everyone through the year on this, all the participants. Ultimately, people have got to know what a sanction could be. But also, I think people are much clearer on the values-driven stuff now.
Now, this year, there was some controversy over Mariana Conte's song, Serving. People critical of the decision to require a lyric rewrite point out that Kant, K-A-N-T, is a double entendre. Yes, it's winking at profanity, but the word as it's spelled and pronounced is the Maltese word for singing. Can you talk about the thinking behind that decision?
I can. Look, every now and then something like this is going to come up when you're working in a multinational situation. Okay. There was two things. One, it just so happens that single word in Maltese in an otherwise English song sounded exactly like the most offensive word in the English language. And we run a primetime Saturday night show that is designed for all ages, all cultures. Okay. And we had a good conversation with the Maltese to say, look, can you see this in context? It is also important to say that it was totally intentional. It wasn't an accident, right? So I think that was the other part of it. There are so America, England, so many places where it's not going to take much for that word to be completely misheard several times.
My prediction of what the decision was going to be was that the word had to be somehow in the projections every time the word was said. I was thinking about when the show Schitt's Creek was on Stephen Colbert, and they had a rule from CBS that every time they said Schitt's Creek, they had to show the SCH spelling.
Excellent.
It's a different word, right? Because I think the challenge you have now is in the gap that has been left, you're now going to have 8,000 people shouting the word in the arena. There have been, experimentations with anti-booing technology in Eurovision in the past. So is there a plan right now on how to handle that?
So look, well, one way, the song's done its job. It's got us talking, right? So, good luck to them, right? It's done exactly what they wanted it to do. There's several things here. The first thing is, our job is to identify the problem, not the answer. It is really important to us that it is the artist that comes up with the answer, right? It's their performance, it's their song. And I know that the artist is making sure in their performance and the musicality of it that there isn't an overt invitation for anyone to fill in the thing. And all I can ask of our brilliant audiences is, you are on primetime television in front of all ages across the world. And as much as the actions and the acts of those on stage matter, so do yours. So have a think about how you want the world to think about Eurovision. We all share a desire to make sure that Eurovision sends its message that music can bring us together in difficult times. And therefore, we all have a responsibility to think about our actions and to make sure that everybody is only welcomed, and that a really young kid who is watching it for the first time, who maybe like many of us is also searching for a community, doesn't have that TV shut off by their parent because some word is being shouted every 5 seconds, right?
There is this kind of maybe bigger issue with what you're grappling with, right? Because like you've said, Eurovision has expanded a lot. It's really connected with the Gen Z audience and has sort of consciously, I think, become a little bit more up to the minute as far as contemporary pop is concerned. With that does come these sort of boundary pushing pop acts. Has there been any thought to trying to, again, just sort of come up with maybe a more codified set of standards and practices for what is acceptable? on the Eurovision stage? No.
No, I don't think so, because if history is littered with the corpses of people who try to be the moral core of anything. This is about discussion and art, right? It is the job of pop music to push boundaries. It is the job of artists to talk about what is going on in the world, right? And I will march on the streets before they are not allowed to do that, right? But then what we've got is artists in context, right? And the context here is a prime time family show. There are spaces where artists can be, totally free to express themselves in completely X-rated or whatever terms they want, and that's great. There are other spaces where that art needs to be translated to context, not only age, but cultural. If you're working in an international thing, I would much rather everybody be reaching everyone than certain countries switching off because of X, Y, and Z.
Eurovision's put a considerable amount of effort into expanding into new markets. Can you talk about your thinking on that front moving forward? And is there any concern that in expanding too much, you lose what is now a relatively unified coalition in terms of values?
Yes, to the last thing, that's always the thing. On the one hand, you've got this amazing thing that demonstrates how the world can come together through music. How can we share that more with the world? That's the natural instinct, okay? But you're absolutely right. If we want to do that, how can we make sure that we retain all the preciousness about this thing? Right? And that what it means doesn't in any way get diluted, or its values don't get diluted. Hopefully have some really exciting stuff to talk about in the future. But the reason why we're not rushing into it or saying anything is because of exactly what you say. You want to do it. You want to be really careful with this precious thing. It's taken 70 years to craft.
Finally, with everything going on in the world, I'm wondering if you can speak to kind of what Eurovision means at a moment like this.
I think that's an incredibly powerful thing for people of all ages and all cultures to watch a space where people are getting on, they're sharing their views, they may be disagreeing a bit, but unlike the grown-ups in their big houses in powerful places, this is a group of invariably younger people who, through music and art and through coming together and being together, find a way to live with each other. And, it's so powerful. It always has been.
Martin Green, thank you so much for joining us.
So much. And we'll see you in Basel.
Yes.
Are you coming? Are you going to be there? You're going to be physically there?
Yes, we will be physically there.
Brilliant. Oh, that's great. Well, look at it. Make sure you come say hi.
All the mysteries of the Euroverse.